I think the title of this book like gets people interested.
Yeah.
They just like they see it and they're like, oh, I want to know about that. So I had like maybe a dozen people being like, I just saved that countdown. I'm like, oh, wow. Normally you get like maybe one.
It's a spicy one, that's for sure.
It's a spicy one and it's gonna be good. But I want to hear, how's art been treating you lately? Have things been good?
Not too bad.
That's good.
I've been painting here and there, just coming up with some new ideas, and
The usual.
being a full-time artist is not easy, and I'm probably gonna have to take a side job. So I've been applying for jobs as well. So yeah.
Oh, nice. Anything that sounds interesting that's a part-time job that you're
just
like
just data entry, because I can do it remotely
love it.
from anywhere. So
Love it.
yeah.
That's a good one. I've been preparing for, I've got a show coming up. I'm hanging it on Wednesday. It's at a restaurant, which I haven't showed at before. So this will be a new experience. They were like, we want art for our walls. And I'm like, I can give you that. I'm like, do you sell work at all? And they're like, we usually sell art that's like under $200 is usually the kind of art that sells. And then I was like, okay, I can do that. And then they were like, but we want your most expensive shiny pieces. And I'm like, okay. You can hold my art hostage for a few months. I guess that's fine. If it sells, I'll be like amazed and outstanded. Yeah. Well, shall we get started? Gonna put our gay face on, and then we will start the book club. Friends and foes, welcome to Brushwork Podcast. My name is Stephanie Scott. Today I have Visual Nomad here with me, and we're talking about art book club. I did that in the wrong order. Normally I'm like on it today, but fairly unpracticed. Hold on. We gotta try one more time. This is what live podcasting is like. You just repeat the same phrases over and over again, and then you're like, at some point when I'm editing, I'll be happy that I repeated things.
You clip out what you want, yeah.
And it's great, and it's super. Let's try this again. Friends and foes, welcome to Brushwork Podcast. My name is Stephanie Scott. Today on the podcast, I have Visual Nomad because today is Art Book Club. And today on Art Book Club, we have Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists by Linda Nochlin. This book, which is really an essay, is itty bitty. It's very cute. It's like 150 pages when you include the edition that's been added on since this essay first came out. This essay came out in the 1970s. Then there was an update to it 30 years later called 30 Years Later. This was in 2006, I believe, and it has an additional, more contemporary look on the subject by Linda herself. This book is... I loved this book. Just straight out of the gate, I loved this book. I loved this little essay. We've heard about this book several times in our, like, I don't know, in other books that we've read. People have referenced this, and I was like, you know what we gotta do? We gotta go to the source. we gotta
Yeah, you've got to read this.
We gotta read the essay if it's coming up this many times. So that's what we've done this month in January, and we read this book. First thoughts, what'd you think of it?
I think it's great. At first, when I dug in, it got me stirred up because they kind of started to come from this space of, well, if there are no great women artists, then there never were, because if there were, we would have heard about them. And I'm like, hold on. Like, they just, like, they start, like, really condescending to the feminist movement to kind of get people pulled in. And then they turn it on its head, and I think they do a great job of, you gotta like repeatedly ask yourself that question to dig deeper. When you get to one level, you go, but why have there been no great women artists? And as you continue to dig deeper and deeper and deeper, you start to see it kind of unravel in society, how things have been structured to leave women at a disadvantage in some shape or form, and not just women. Like, I think that's one of the great things about this piece is they're like, this applies to several people groups, not just women.
Oh, there was a
You know.
great metaphor. It was like, why have there been no great Eskimo tennis players?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which made me crack up when I was reading it. I'm like, yeah, I feel like that just that statement alone is a huge portion of this essay. Of it's of opportunity, but also of your surroundings. This book was
you were talking about why haven't there been any great Eskimo tennis players, or why haven't there been X, Y, and Z?
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at it, you're like, well, of course there haven't been. Like, who plays tennis in the North Pole? Like, come on, or in Alaska, like it's snowy. Like, of course they don't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, short of Cool Runnings, which is a whole anomaly in and of itself, but that's a whole different story.
Yes.
But yeah, like I think it's great when they juxtapose those things to kind of open that question up of, is it just because there never were any, or is it because of the environment that has surrounded those people groups,
Mm-hmm.
and the acceptance of society of those structures and those systems that have been put in place.
It's true. It's both opportunity, it's the structures, it's the history, and it's what people want moving forward versus what is oppressed upon them to have. Which I guess is the same thing as saying structures, but in this essay, towards the beginning, she starts talking about how even saying the sentence, why have there been no great women artists, how even saying that allows for those restrictions to kind of fall off of the problem. Having the openness to even think about the question, why have there been no great women artists? And we're still talking about the first part of the essay, which was let out in 1970, so keep that in mind.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know. It creates like a chain reaction. When you think about this question, why have there been no great women artists? It creates a reaction of change within each individual, but also when people start pushing for, ways to make women artists, let them actually have greatness. It changes, I don't know, the embracement of like a history. It changes the challenges. It changes the meaningful questions of the time and around where you are. It's so impactful that I think it's kind of fun to read an essay that was written in the 70s and to see how it changed things. At the beginning of this episode, we were talking about how this essay was referenced in so many books we've read, and those books have been from the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, etc. And people, they think about it and they make decisions based off of it, and things are a lot better for quote-unquote women artists at this point. And I don't know, that's kind of cool that a single essay has done all of that and more.
I think the main crux of that first part is that she goes, okay, so this aside, there's no tennis players that are Eskimos.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, so why are there no great women artists? Well, let's look at society in different time periods. What I thought was really funny is she breaks down the mythology, quote unquote, around male artists from past times.
Mm-hmm.
Van Gogh was this beleaguered artist that, was, as he was going crazy, was painting hundreds of, sunflowers, and he just magically knew how to paint, and it just came out of him. It's this, well, they already had this talent ahead of time, and then they met their the last book that we read, specifically Michelangelo.
Yep.
She brings it up and says, the story behind it is that his teacher went away on a hiatus, came back, and his teacher said, he's greater than me. Well, how true is that story really? Like,
it's not.
Folks,
Fully practiced.
Yeah. Marketing has been around for eons
Mm-hmm.
in several forms and fashions. That is a form of marketing. They want this romanticized concept of
Genius.
this downtrodden artist that has overcome this mountain of, you know, hardship to become this great heroic person, of which some are horribly ghastly human beings. Gauguin being one of them. Let's get to that one. He is a monster. Like, oh, he went to this tropical place and painted all these beautiful women. Gauguin died of syphilis because he tried to sexually abuse half of those women that he painted. He took several wives.
Yeah.
He was just a womanizing human being.
He was
And
worse.
it's awful. He's a hell of a painter. He's a trash human being, for lack of a better phrase. You know, there is this as I dig into more male artists, especially like that time with Gauguin, Van Gogh, Toulouse-Lautrec, that whole era, there is this misogynistic, womanizing piece of these men that is glorified. Oh, he's a ladies' man. You know, he would meet these young ladies in the tavern, and he would bring them back to his place, and in the soft light of his lantern he would paint these beautiful women. You're like, really, dude? Really? Like, come on. Come on. And yeah, and like, and he had to live in this like poverty ridden life in order to be a qualified great artist. I think Damien Hirst would argue that point and say, no, I appreciate the millions and billions of dollars that I've made off of my art. I'm fine being rich. Welcome to my 40,000 square foot studio that is 5 stories. Come hang out. We have a shop downstairs with a coffee shop. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yes. So, yeah, it's just it's wild as she digs into some of this and she starts talking about class. Like, why have there been no aristocratic people
That's
that
a big one, yeah.
that have become famous painters? Like, if you think about it, there are less than a handful that I can think of that were ever truly like wealthy and they decided to paint. And it's because of the social pressures that were put on them. They had meetings that they had to attend. They were supposed to socialize. Again, you know, back then they had, you know, nobility had to try to court other nobility to instill the power or ensure the power would continue in their family and the wealth would continue in their family. So they had a lot of
It was a lot of social responsibility, and it was a lot
yeah.
of just
Yeah.
lack of time to actually devote to being an
Yeah.
artist.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there was no women artists, but there was also no aristocratic artists, which is that were like
Right.
truly remarkable. And there was can we backtrack a little bit to like the idea of genius? Because she talks about this a lot.
Yeah.
She talks about how, oh, it's just magical. And you said it was marketing, and it is marketing. It is the best kind of marketing, where it's like, oh no, they just sprung fully formed from the brow, and they were amazing, incredible artists. But there is no such thing as genius. And the more we read about these artists and read these art books, the more I'm like, absolutely, it just doesn't exist. I think people have like skill sets that lead you to certain things better than others, but I don't think there's anything like genius. And when someone says that someone has genius, you have to look at what is their background. A huge part of this book talks about how people's families, especially male parental figures, are the ones that have cultivated any kind of greatness in women in history at all. If you look at Rosa Bonheur, if you looked at Mary Cassatt, with her friendship, again, another male figure in her life, who have like cultivated their artistic identity and their greatness from a very young age, or even an impressionable age. And it's just like, oh, they were surrounded by people who allowed them to make, and who had paved the way for them to actually have some recognition in history. And that's remarkable. That is where any kind of greatness can come from. I feel like I have it personally was able to make art my living because of my family, right? Because people who were like, you should make art and you should pursue that, and that's a good thing. And it was my teachers growing up and blah blah blah. And when you go back to, you know, several hundred years, and you're just like, oh, wow, that is even more rare then to have that sort of thing happen for you, where you're just like cultivated into becoming a great artist. And then, you know, the marketing is so good. I'm like, wow, should I change my marketing?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and they kind of just like glaze over that issue. Like, it's not like they don't say it, but they glaze over it. It's like, let's give it a sentence. Oh, and his father was a painter also. Oh, well.
Wait. Yeah.
I mean, Picasso's father was a professor. He saw the talent in his son and the fact that Picasso would not sit still. So he's like, okay, if this is what he wants to do, I'll just foster it. Like, give him something to do. His father just happened to be extremely equipped to be able to teach his son how to do art, because that's what he did for a living.
Yeah.
Like, it's that whole family tradition passed down apprenticeship concept that has been accepted by society forever. Like, you inherit the family business. This was part of some families' businesses. One of their parents was an artist, you know? And so we have to look at that as well. Like, the reason why some of this happened the way it did was, okay, if they're the firstborn, father wants to pass his knowledge down to his son. If his son is the firstborn, of course, that's who's going to learn the majority of what's going on. If they have another son, he's probably not going to get the same treatment. He'll still get more than what a sister would, because she's probably going to be expected to learn the female side of the family things, you know, washing clothes, cleaning, cooking, whatever it entails, paying bills, going to market, that kind of thing. Things had been separated, you know, and so, yeah, a lot of it just comes down to, again, society has pigeonholed people into certain positions, and it has made it extremely difficult. Even some of society's their beliefs that they've held strongly have directly affected the development of female artists. The fact that female artists were not able to paint nude models for the longest time, you know, but men were openly allowed to paint naked women and men like it was not a big deal. And it's like, and part of the development that was so key to becoming a famous artist or becoming a great studied and practiced artist was that figure study that you would do towards the end of your classes and stuff. Because you would go from there to, like, you would go from like plaster forms and that, or from human forms into going to a museum or wherever art was, you know, posted, and you were to paint three-dimensional models that were in front of you, the sculptures and that kind of thing, which women they did not have access to. They just did not have access to that at all.
It's true. And how unfortunate.
I mean, they ended up having to paint cows. Like, that was the first thing they were ever really able to paint, quote unquote, nude and get musculature and that kind of thing from the subject. So
there's a great picture in this book of a cow in a figure drawing classroom, surrounded by women in beautiful dresses practicing drawing them.
Yeah.
And I feel like all the images in this book really do attest to overcoming being an artist at all, let alone being great. And
Right.
it's it's good. Yeah. Women weren't allowed to do any kind of figurative drawing of a nude figure um, at all, not even of their same sex. And
Yeah.
years and years and years down the line, they were granted smaller and smaller allowances where it's like, okay, you can draw a figure, but they must be fully clothed. Like, you won't be able to see the figure, but you can fully clothed. To partially draped was a rule in one of them, and it talks about this in this essay. There's little chapters in this essay. We've gone through several of them already, about genius, about going through the nude, about parentage. And now we should talk about accomplishment and how and the idea of hobby. So there is, I feel like there's still such a great weight on making art, especially when it comes to women making art. And that most people think, oh, you think about art as a hobby first before you think of it as a profession or a lifelong profession, a lifelong just like mastery to overcome. That's the word I was going for, a mastery. And even if you were clever, even if you practiced a lot, if you were a woman, you are doing this as a hobby, and therefore it is not as great just on principle. And that's such a tough thing to overcome. And even in our modern day, I feel like a lot of artists don't call themselves artists because they're like, no, I'm a hobbyist. I don't have that next level of greatness or mastery. And I just, it gets frustrating because people think about art as like, oh, we're dabbling in art. We're just messing around. We're not actually creating something that has value. And then you think about your work as something that doesn't have value, and it's just it's fascinating. I don't know. What are your thoughts on? I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong.
I mean, I think, yeah, but I mean, like what you were saying, like I think that imposter syndrome plays into that as well. Like, we're told that we're supposed to like marginalize ourselves and not think be humble, quote unquote, about our skills. Even though we have like worked extremely hard to get where we're at, we've put in thousands of hours to get where we're at, and learn what we've learned. I think that, and again, it falls back to, again, that whole idea of women are to be seen and not heard. And yeah, I think it's easy for society to just slide women into that slot because they've created that structure. And she talks about that earlier on in the piece. It's just easy because that's, quote unquote, the natural progression of things, because we haven't taken the time to ask ourselves this question and really dig into it and ask why. It's not this, I'm screaming from the top of my lungs to be obnoxious and annoying. It's, let's have a concerted conversation about this. Let's dig into why I feel the way I do about it and why you feel the way you do about it. Is it just because of a nature versus nurture thing? Or is there, some legitimacy to either side, depending on what position you're taking? It's, I think it's, I think it's hard. Like, even now, even with the progressiveness that we've had in our society, as far as females taking positions of high optics in our society, I still think that we struggle with this. We still have this this concept of, like, we have to be this wilting flower.
Oh, wilting flowers.
Mm-hmm. I just, I think about the concept of people saying, um, you need to smile more. You know, if you ask yourself, how many times have you seen a man have that said to him? And compared to the times that women have had that said to them.
Oh,
Like
agreeability.
we're supposed to, yeah, like we're supposed to be agreeable at all times, no matter how we feel about what's going on around us. We're supposed to have a smile on our face and we're just supposed to go about our day like nothing ever happened. And
Do you remember
it's,
those posters?
yeah, yeah,
Those like movie posters that someone had like altered to where all the
yeah,
men were smiling on the cover, and it was very funny. And
yeah.
that's an aside. I feel like we were on the precipice of something really interesting a couple of minutes ago, and I want to go back to it. There's
Okay.
you talked about imposter syndrome, and my brain was like, oh, I want to read more about imposter syndrome in the history of of trying to go for anything great, and how we
Mm,
accomplish that, and how we shy away from it. And I I feel like I personally don't have a lot of imposter syndrome because I've beaten down that dark demon as much as I could.
mm-hmm.
And I'm no absolutely not perfect in that way, but I I feel like when people have imposter syndrome, and it prohibits them from making artwork of any kind of gender you are,
Mm-hmm.
it's because something seems so on a pedestal above you, or something that's like you really want, but you're like, I can see no way of achieving that, and all I do is this meager little thing that is, my doodles on a sketchbook, or whatever it is. That's an example.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, maybe a great like a great charcoal drawing. I'm gonna go with drawing as my example here. And
Yep.
you're like, oh, I don't think I could ever do that. Or you're like, I want to do that so badly, and that person has already done it, so why should I do it? And nothing new under the sun, etc. But it's, I feel like we have so much pressure trying to be great in our day-to-day life. We have so much pressure trying to
Mm-hmm.
be a great women artist, you and I. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, the point is there. Hold on, I have to keep thinking about this. It's like I'm just gonna keep spouting words until this thought comes out.
Okay.
Um, it's like,
I'm following.
you're
Go ahead.
following. It's it's. Do we have imposter syndrome because of all of these other shenanigans on top of our creation that have come from hundreds of years of history of being oppressed to not make art, that now when we finally have opportunities to do it, we feel like we're going to get beaten down for it? Is that why we have imposter syndrome?
Um,
Maybe.
I
I don't
would
know.
I would posit that the answer is yes to that. I mean, that's what I'm thinking in the back of my head, is that whole concept of we're supposed to be diminutive as women, like society expects us to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
And imposter syndrome feeds into that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you do something extremely well and you start to get visibility and praise for that,
Mm-hmm.
you're no longer diminutive.
Mm-hmm.
You're extraordinary, and as women, we have this programming that has been passed down to us by our fathers and mothers, and other family members. um like you said, that has been perpetuated for centuries. I definitely think that I would find it hard. I have not heard of a great male painter that has ever had an issue with imposter syndrome. They've always been extremely full of themselves and self-confident. Um,
At least it's marketed
Damien
that way.
Hirst as one of them,
Yeah.
like Picasso. exactly the same thing. Story goes around that he had to pay for a meal. He didn't have any money. He signed a napkin and said this should be enough to pay for the meal.
I really hope that's
Like
true. That's
what?
hysterical. It's so, it's
Like
so
like
pompous.
what? Like how can you be that brazen and full of yourself to think that you could do that? Like I I would hope that my friends would smack me if I got to that point.
Oh, well, I'm going to be an enabler and be like, you should sell your signature on a napkin for dinner. That sounds
Oh,
great.
I have no problem selling my signature, but to like be that bold and be
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
well, I'm great. Like, I don't know that I would speak of myself in that tone. I would say, I've accomplished a lot, of course,
It's a different,
Um,
it's a different like ancestral genetic heritage there of like,
Sure.
it's different
Sure.
in so many ways where it's like even just by being born woman, you are you are so different. And
Sure.
that kind of like audacity is rare, and then on the flip side it's unfair when women have it and then they get called skeeving and rude and
They get called
ugly.
bitches. Like, let's be real. Like, they get called a bitch.
Yeah, they do.
Because so there's a story that I heard about the singer Martina McBride. If anybody knows anything about Martina McBride beyond her music, it is that she is extremely driven and extremely particular about her performances.
Great.
She has been called a bitch several times.
Yeah.
Several times. Because people view that as too forward. Like, she is, overstepping her quote unquote bounds. Well, she is the boss. This is her business, and she is allowed to expect certain things to happen in her business. If a male did that, they'd be like, "Oh, he's just being the big man." Let's pat him on the back. He's a tough guy. He runs a tight ship. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Sometimes I think about Taylor Swift's music video, The Man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I feel like I get it in a way that is, I'm like, even though this woman has so much money and so much success and so much things, it would have been easier if she was a man. She would have been further even now than she is. And it's wild. Like, even someone who has that much just incredible tenacity and success and ability to overcome things that have happened, those things wouldn't have happened to her if she was masculine. Isn't that so obnoxious? And
Right.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
I think, yeah.
I want to state here also that I think gender is a concept. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I think it can
Yeah.
be. I think it should be. I think it
Yeah.
very easily can be. Because I think that people on all sides of the spectrum are capable of doing all different kinds of things very well, equally as well.
Yeah.
Depending on who they are. We can point out several situations, where it may be an anomaly, but they're able to do that.
It's true. Yeah, towards the end of the essay, Nochlin talks about, I feel like I'm saying her last name wrong because it's French, but Rosa Bonheur, who is the great animal painter of her time. Have you ever read any books about her?
I haven't.
She's fascinating, and I might actually pull a biography that I have read in the past, but would love a reread of for book club in the future. She is in this essay. Linda talks about her, and she's like, she has all the typical struggles of her sex, but also she is a great painter, and her father was a painter, and she learned from him, and then she went to school, and she had her partner who Rosa was absolutely a lesbian, but in this first essay she's like, I don't think she was gay, it was platonic, but no, it was not platonic. This was like her life partner. And like Rosa had to apply to get a license to wear men's clothing so she wouldn't be harassed when she went to the different horse fairs and animal fairs around to paint and to draw, and that the basics of, you know, her femininity really hindered her in her art. And I think she's just an interesting figure to learn about. If you like any kind
Sure.
of realistic painting and you like animals and you don't know about Rosa Bonheur, you should look her up because she makes some of the most amazing paintings I've ever seen in my life. And they're they're so good, but it's I don't know where I was gonna go with that. She's interesting because she's an unfeminine feminine person, and I think she rose to great publicity because she rejected a lot of her own femininity in order to get there. And I think that here's what I want. I think that's a little bit of a shame that in order to get somewhere, rejecting your own femininity was such a big step you had to take in order to find a sort of greatness. And I feel like now in, you know, our year of 2024, that's no longer the case. You can, in fact, having a high femme concept to who you are as a person is, you can still become a great artist now. And she does talk about that. Linda talks about that in her 30-year update, how it's easier to be a great artist and it's much easier to have great publicity. And there are great women artists now, and have been for the last, you know, 30 years or so. There's, you know, Judy Chicago and so many great people. But in the time where in order to become great, you had to reject femininity, that's upsetting. It's upsetting to hear, and it's upsetting to see the patterns of in history. I don't know.
Well, and I would argue that it's still a current issue. So let's take Tracy Emin, for instance.
I don't know her, but okay.
Okay, Tracy Emin is part of the YBAs. She's part of that group with Damien and
Oh yeah.
Jenny Savile. Okay, so Tracy is the misfit wild child of that group. She's from Margate, which means she is, it's like Jersey Shore, let's put it that way. She is the British version of a Jersey girl.
Okay.
For all intents and purposes, that's how she grew up. When she came onto the scene, she was very rough. I would liken her to Joan Jett of the painter world.
I hear you.
She was very rough. She's most noted for having a interview on Channel 4, or a roundtable discussion with a group of men, and she was the only female. It was after they had given the Turner Award. They had this meeting and they sat down and they talked about the Turner Award and, you know, progress of art and all of that. And she was blitzed. She was completely blitzed. But the thing is she was so clear in that moment, and she spoke such truth into that conversation that these men, these grown men, old enough to be her father, were losing their minds. And she just got to the point where she got up and walked away.
Wow.
She was just like, you're not going to listen to me. You're perpetuating the exact thing that we're trying not to do. And you're perpetuating this. Well, Tracy has evolved over time, but I believe if you look, she is the drawing professor at the Royal Academy of Art in England, which is a very prestigious position. She is, I believe, one of the first women to hold that position.
Wow.
There are several men artists that continually like to take a dump on her drawing skills and holding that position. Now, I would argue that her drawing abilities are no worse than some of these great quote unquote male artists that are garnering $50 million for their drawings.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the artist, but it's almost exactly like that. Now, Tracy Emin can draw her face off. like ridiculously great artist. She's known as a painter, but she's a fantastic drawer. Now, she is devolved and stripped her drawing down into very rudimentary sketches that some people find off-putting because she's supposed to be the top of the top, and that's how she's drawing. Well, people didn't say anything to Picasso when he flipped the art world on his head by doing very rudimentary cubism. You know, when we all know he could paint anything, the best of like arguably one of the best painters that ever lived. He was extremely talented. But yeah, just to like, I would say she still fights that.
Yeah.
Jenny Savile, I think, still fights that. She's less vocal about it than Tracy is. Tracy has changed a lot since COVID. She was diagnosed with the same cancer that killed her mother. It's genetic, apparently.
That's rough.
They had to remove a lot of stuff in her. She can no longer swim, which is one of the things she loves the most. But she's had to evolve. She's, for lack of a better phrase, she's mellowed out in her old age. She settled into her. I think she was a bit unhappy in her skin at certain points, but she was very transparent about who she was. And at a time in her life as a young adult, that's very hard to be transparent with people. She was talking to people about her abortions, her love interests. Like, she was putting it out there. She was brave. And people just kind of tried to poo-poo her into quietness. And luckily they weren't able to do that. You know, she was loud enough as a young adult to say, no, I'm here, I'm loud, and you're just going to have to deal with it. Like, if I was somebody else, you'd be praising me. Like, that was one of the things she said on Channel 4. Like, I sleep around. If I was a male artist, you guys would be praising me for being the macho man that, you know,
It's true.
gets all the ladies.
It's true.
You know?
Yep.
She's like, so why is it bad for me to do that? You know? Like, we have such a bad double standard here, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's the defense of femininity, I feel like, is both a obligation and something that's not everyone wants to do who, you know, identifies as female. And it's, I don't know, it's tough. It's easy. Sorry, let me restart. It's easy to discard what feels feminine in order to reach the next step, and it's tough to keep it with you and still achieve what you need to achieve, to pull your art forward. And I think that will be tough for more generations to come, even though it's a lot better now than it was 30 years ago, and a lot better than it was, you know, several hundred years ago. Yeah. Do you have any quotes you want to read from the book?
Let me see here. If you have some, go ahead and start talking about them, and I'll come up with the ones that
my favorite quote is not really a quote. It's just like a phrase that she she's like casually tossed out, and it's calling people who are feminine artists my sisters of the palette, and I love that. And I'm like, should I stop calling my audience my friends and foes and start calling them sisters of the palette? I've gathered you here today. It sounds kind of witchy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let's see.
They're pretty good.
I don't know. I don't know that there's any in particular that have stood out.
And that's fine. It's, again, this essay is fairly short. I mean, for an essay, it's long, but this is, for a book, it's fairly short. I would recommend it. I feel like there are some bits of this that, you know, if you're reading the original essay, you're like, okay, some things are changed now that needed updating, but then you read her update to this and you're like, okay, that,
Right.
it comes together. And
Sure.
yeah, I'm going to keep this book on my shelf. I really enjoyed reading it, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it sets you alight. It sets your brain into thinking, and it sets you into a good place for making art, and it's a fun
Yeah.
one.
Because, I do think it's tough, like applying for different shows and that kind of thing. Like, some of this does come into play, um, when you get in and you have to go to receptions and interact with people. How do you carry yourself
Hmm.
as a female artist? Like, what do you wear? How do you talk? Who do you talk to? Um, you know, there's a million different things where I feel like men are nervous when they go into that situation, sure, but they're not thinking about, oh, am I wearing the appropriate thing? Like, I don't think I know of very many males that really focus on something like that. It's like, oh, I wear nice slacks and a shirt, easy peasy. Females have a million different things they could wear, and it's like, is it appropriate or not?
What do you think about what is now I need to know, what is your best? We're having a show and it's the artist's opening outfit. What are you wearing?
Oh God, it just depends. Like, this show that I had in Columbus, it was a big one. People from all over the state are there. And I struggled with it. Like, I asked advice from my friend loves clothes, and I was just like, I ended up just wearing slacks and a nice shirt.
Hmm.
It was cold that day too, so it was probably the smartest thing I could have done. But you know, I generally wear nice dress pants or in a top, a blouse of some sort.
Hmm.
I'm not a huge dress person. I don't really have any dresses that are dressy enough for something like that.
Hmm.
Most of my dresses are, fairly informal and not appropriate for that time. But yeah, I mean, and you can have fun with it. It
You
can be
can.
fun. Like, it can be freeing as a female because you do have so many options. You can like really dig in and have some fun with it.
I always think
Um,
about so like I have an artist opening coming up soon, and I'm already thinking
mhm,
about it this like a couple weeks in advance here. I'm like, okay, I need to dress in a way that says I am the artist. From like, if you like enter the
mhm,
room and you're like wondering where the artist is and you've never met me, like you need to know immediately. So it needs to have like
yeah,
that bit of like audacity, or I guess like just
yeah,
sparkle to it or whatever. Maybe not literal sparkle, but
hmm,
you get it. And then it's like, okay, I want to be feminine but not sexual, and that needs to happen.
right.
And it needs to be professional, and it needs to look like I have some authority over what I'm doing. And I think about those four things every single time.
Mm.
And
Well,
getting that correct
well,
is not always easy.
yeah. Well, and I think it's knowing the audience too, but sometimes you can take risks. Like, I think of Kennedy Yanko, and I don't know if you know who she is, but Kennedy is this statuesque human being. Like, she moved to New York City and became a personal trainer. She's extremely fit,
Mm,
tall, beautiful. Like, there are fashion houses that hire her to be a model. She's that pretty.
that's cool.
And the stuff that she wears to openings is bonkers. Like when you said, not too sexual, I'm like, are you kidding me? You should see what Kennedy Yanko wears.
It's true.
Like, sometimes you're like, how did you get into that and keep it on? Like, good props to you. And like, I think she owns it in a very graceful way too. Like, it's extremely overt and in your face, but whenever you would like come to talk to her, she's very kind and calm
Hmm.
and very soft spoken. So it kind of sets you off kilter if you saw her, like, just to hear her talk and stuff. You're like, whoa, hold on, like, what the heck?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, it can be that way. It can be
It
it
can
can
be.
be audacious if you really want to, you know?
And it's fun. I don't know. But again, we're thinking about
Mhm.
presentation. Like, how do you present yourself
Yeah.
matters so much more when you are more feminine. It's,
Hmm.
yeah, it's different. Overall, I'm giving this book 5 stars because I liked it a lot.
Same.
Yeah. Which
Same,
is,
same.
congratulations, our first 5-star book read of the year, which is the first book of
I
the year.
know.
Incredible. Amazing.
No, I just appreciated the way that the question was approached. Like it started out like, oh, is this just gonna be like beat the drum?
Hmm.
Like every other like conversation we have about this with the other people. And it's like, no, let's dig into it. Let's take
Yep.
the emotion out of it and let's look at it logically.
I can see why it was
Like,
referenced so
how
much.
does this make sense? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's good. I kind of want to read more books by Linda Nochlin or more of her essays.
Mm.
If I find a good one, I'll let y'all know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Any final thoughts, or you ready for the next book?
No, just read it. If you get the chance, read it.
Just
Find it and read
read
it. It's worth the it may take you like maybe an hour to read it or whatever. It's only like 26 pages long. It's not very long.
Short and sweet.
So,
Super good. All right. Well, that was Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists by Linda Nochlin. And our next book for February is by a I thought, I like to like lead each book into the next one. And I thought, we should just read a book by a man. I think it's time. So here is How to Be an Artist by Jerry Saltz, who is one of the great art writers of our time. And this book came out in 2020. This book is about it's an inspirational book. It has many, when I just like flip through it, we got lots of like photos and things. And I like lots of photos and things. So I think it'll be a little bit educational, a little bit art history related. It's got 50 chapters and like 4 steps or something like that. I'm just flipping through really quick.
Okay.
It's short, it's sweet. I think it's gonna be good. I think I got this for Christmas, and I just thought, might as well put it on the docket. And I don't know. I feel like every time I hear about Jerry Saltz, I just like his advice. So I think it'll be good. It candy-sized advice about many different topics. So that's what we're going to read for February. Yeah, how to be an artist. If you want to join Art Book Club for February, you should read the book and then talk about the book with us in the chat here on Twitch, because it would be super fun. If you're looking to find more of Brushwork Podcast, it's on YouTube, it's on Spotify, it's on Apple. We record the podcast once a month here on Twitch with Jennifer Nomad. My name is Stephanie Scott. You can find me at stephaniescott.art. That's my website and my Instagram handle. And you can find Jennifer at
visualnomad.art and Visual Nomad here on Twitch and Visual Nomad __ on Instagram.
We love to see it. It's been really fun chatting about this book with you today, Jen. I think we did good. I think that was a good one. All right.
Yeah.
Friends and foes, make good choices. Have a good day. Until next time, see you later. Goodbye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye.